Welcome back to Revolutionary Health, the show that focuses on Black gay men's health and wellness. I'm Michael Ward. As always, follow us like everything on our social media. We're on Twitter at Building Desire, Facebook and Instagram at The Counter Narrative. This week, we're continuing our COVID-19 series with the check-in about Detroit. So we have a very exciting guest that is joining us, a brother to the CMP tribe, somebody that I've gotten to know so well. So I will let you introduce yourself for everybody out there that doesn't know who you are.
I'm L. Michael Gipson. I'm nobody.
You're somebody.
I'm somebody because God don't make no junk. I am founder and executive director of Black Bear Brotherhood, and founder of a lot of other things over the years, co-founder, I should say, of a lot of other things over the years. Beyond Identities Community Center, the Black Alphabet Film Festival, lots of stuff.
Come on, resume, break it down. And the friends of the family and of the show. And one of the things that we're doing with these COVID-19 check-ins is definitely checking in with different cities and how it's affecting us as Black people in general. So I just want to begin by a little bit about where you are in Detroit. How is Detroit being affected by coronavirus? All of those things.
Yeah, well, Michigan, in over the last about 5 weeks, has become. We go back and forth between number 3 and number 4 in the nation. We're in a neck to battle with Massachusetts for title most recently. Unfortunately, our death numbers are definitely number 3. We beat out California. If you think about like how big Michigan is versus how big California is, that's kind of crazy that our death numbers look like they do. Over 30,000 people in Michigan have tested positive for COVID-19. Roughly about 2,300 people have already died. Disproportionately, that falls to Black and brown people, particularly Black people. Detroit is an 82% Black city, so that's not surprising that, Wayne County or where Detroit is located is number 1. But even when places where we're not the majority, in like Macomb County or Oakland County, counties that are decidedly white, we average 30 to 45% in the number of people who are getting it and the number of people who are dying. So, this is hitting Black folks hard. And while the majority of those people are elderly, as is the case in a lot of Midwestern places like Milwaukee, is disproportionately impacting Black middle-aged men, which I squarely fall in the category of. And so, it's been a pretty harrowing time. Our governor has made the news quite a bit. And I think that what was interesting is initially there was a lot of support for Governor Whitmer's stay-at-home strategies and shutting the city down or the state down and the schools down. We didn't do it as early as Ohio, but we did it fairly early. But once the media started making it clear that the people who were getting it primarily were Black, suddenly you had conservative media coming out and saying, oh, we need to reopen the economy. And you had Michigan be one of the 2 or 3 states, I think Kentucky was another, that had protests. And if you look at who the protests were, they were decidedly white. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think people were much more comfortable sitting at home if they thought the majority of people who were getting it were white. Ironically, in Michigan, that's still the case. We're disproportionately getting it. We're not the majority of people are getting it. But once that Black face got put on COVID-19, then it was suddenly like, oh yeah, I'm not staying at home for a bunch of Black people who died. Right? That's what it felt like, I think, for Black and brown people in the state. So that's what's going on in Michigan, man. I personally have known 4 people who have died. I currently know 2 people who are on ventilators or in the hospital. Some of that is just a byproduct of being someone who's lived in a lot of places. I'm not from Michigan. I'm not from Detroit. I've lived here going into 6 years now. So, if you live in a lot of different places and travel a lot, you get to know a lot of people. And unfortunately, the byproduct of that is you also know a lot of people get sick and die from something like this. So.
Yes, sadly, and I'm definitely sorry to hear about you losing people and things like that to the virus. I, for me personally, and we talked about it a little bit before the show. I, in my own ignorance, didn't realize that Detroit was also being affected and hit so hard by these. So even doing a little research, I think on what is it,
Yeah.
Michigan.gov slash coronavirus, all of those things, like looking at the numbers and as you say, see how Black people are being affected um, by COVID-19. To me, it was just like, oh my God, and understand with the stay-at-home order and things like that going on. I just want to pivot a little bit
Sure.
from that. But personally, for you, I know, as you said, you're Black Brotherhood, and you're used to having these virtual, I mean, these gatherings in person of
Yeah.
Black, Black men. So how has that affected you in that way of how that's going?
Well, it's interesting. So I think there are two kinds of people in a moment like this. There are people who are super prepared and maybe overly anxious and overly worried and started preparing very early. And then there are people who are like, oh, this probably won't affect me. It's not going to be as bad as they say. You have to be optimistic. I fall decidedly in the first category. So I work in public health. For many years, I worked on federal grants, including emergency preparedness grants. So I kind of know that really initially in any kind of crisis, you're on your own, unless you're a first responder or the family of a first responder. And so when this first started kind of hitting in, I would say the news media in January around China, but once it became clear that it was spreading outside of China about early February, I was already like stocking up and talking to my brothers about what this might mean. I think maybe I had canceled our Black Bear Brotherhood gathering for March, maybe the first week of March, which was really early. That was before the governor had issued her order. Um, and the potluck. So we do two or three major things. So we have potlucks every month that are in-person gatherings that are at my house, and those can be like 35 to 45 people gatherings in my home. And so no shit, I love my brothers, but that was a lot of bodies and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
coughing, a lot of touching on stuff. I was like, oh no, baby, no, we're not doing all of that. Y'all, I love y'all like cook food, but we're not. I'm not gonna be sitting in the petri dish after that.
That's real.
Yeah, because I always get the house clean before, but not after. And I was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. So I counseled early, and I mean, there was initially a little grumbling. Some of the brothers was like, Michigan hadn't really had cases yet, at least none that were really publicized, and so there was something, like, oh, Michael's overreacting. And then, the very next week, the governor was on the news like, we have our first cases. And I was like, see, I told y'all. And then, like,
Mm-hmm.
before you know it, I think the runaway nature of it was scary to brothers. And then when they started talking about like underlying health conditions that were being impacted, because this has been an evolving crisis. So we get new information every few days about what this virus does and
Right.
who it is impacting. And so I think at first there really wasn't a lot of information. And then it was kind of like, it was kind of like mostly elderly people. But then once they start talking about hypertension and diabetes, now you're hitting where Black people live, right? Like you're hitting where where my brothers
Us.
live. And so I have asthma. And then they started talking, obesity, and I was like, well, I definitely hit that category. So I was like, I'm not playing with this. And so I think once that was the case, brothers got on board once they realized that they were personally at risk. So I think that changed things. I mean, our initial response, after cancellation, in March was everybody was kind of like cool. Then we have like larger community gatherings that we were like this month was supposed to be Essex Hemphill, right? Like we're supposed to have a big, huge community gathering around Essex Hemphill, and we weren't going to be able to do that. And so then it was kind of like, okay, well, what's our schedule going to look like? And May is our anniversary, and we normally do a barbecue, and so yeah, I think it's just kind of reorienting our schedule. We are multiple chapters, so our Cincinnati chapter started spearheading like doing Google Hangouts for the members for their weekly bar night. They started doing once a month. And that was a success. So we borrowed that model. We're going to do our first kind of Google Hangout we would have had our potluck on April 24th, just to make sure people are together. And then kind of what we did to deal with the crisis itself was we immediately started like saying, we had a brother volunteer who runs our Care Bear project, which is kind of like the Good Samaritans for you church folks, that are sick and shut in. And he was like, I'll be willing to drive care packages to people who are ill. And so we launched the Sponsor a Bear's Care project. And so anybody who was sick and shut in and didn't have food or meds, we would invite brothers to sponsor them to make sure that they had the foods and the medications they needed to stay at home and take care of themselves. Because unless you have breathing problems, the hospitals aren't going to take you. So that means that, most of your care is going to be on your own. Luckily, at this point, we have more sponsors than, already ready. They got their bags, they got their water, they ready to go. Then we do people who are ill. So that's a blessing. People ready to help, then we have people who need it. But, we'll see what happens as the weeks continue to progress and more people continue to get sick, especially now that there's a push to reopen the economy, even here in Michigan.
Which is crazy, which is absolutely crazy to me. But I think that's amazing because one of the things that COVID-19 has definitely done is isolate, most of us by ourselves. And especially when it comes to us as Black people, Black gay men in particular, loneliness and all of these things and finding sense of community and all of these things that we have to evolve with technology. So I love the work that y'all are doing and keeping each other safe and protecting ourselves and watching out for ourselves, because a lot of this opening borders and stimulating the economy and all of those things, to me, I feel like it's definitely not looking out for people who are most affected, which is Black people. So yeah. So even in Detroit, with the number of deaths and the cases and not having enough resources and equipment, what is Detroit and Michigan doing to keep you all protected?
Well, the mayor is this week is kind of issued that they have provisions for people who are ill. They just opened on, the state fairgrounds, testing that they can get you, I think, like for a $2 fare, get you to the testing grounds to get tested, and help get you, linked to some care. The problem is that here in Michigan, I don't know what the count is now, but the last time I checked, which was like a week ago, 700 people at like Henry Ford, which is one of our major hospital systems, were on quarantine for COVID-19. Our police department, over 600 people, 700 people there too, are on quarantine for COVID-19. So, so when those kinds of public health systems and public safety apparatuses are already hindered by this issue, there's limitations to what people can do with whoever's left. I know I have a friend who's an orderly, and initially he had gotten exposed, and they asked him to self-quarantine for 2 weeks while they, and it took him like a week and a half to get his test result back, which was kind of crazy since he works at a hospital.
2 weeks?
So yeah, it took like almost 2 weeks to get his results back. Then they gave it, and he didn't have it, so they were like, they wanted him to come back to work, but he has underlying health issues and he's 50, and so he was like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Right.
So they told him he had to take his PTO, and when that runs out, like, he has to figure it out. So, and we have a lot of blue collar brothers, so a lot of people are still having to go to work at Amazon. We have members who are working in factories who are like building ventilators now at like Ford and GM, and they're having to go to work, and social distancing may or may not be able to be practiced as well in those environments. So that's happening. So it's a little scary here in Detroit, all around, particularly for our brothers, because a lot of them, like I said, reflect the Black folks who don't get to work from home. I'm lucky I get to work from home, but that's not the case for the majority of Black people.
Wow. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for joining us to give us this update on what's going on from where you are. I definitely want you to be safe, to take care of yourself. Any last parting words that you want people to know, resources they can seek, how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, well, I guess if you're a Black Bear Brotherhood member or even just a brother in Detroit and you don't have meds and you are sick, please feel free to reach out to us, blackbearbrotherhood@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, blackbearbrotherhood.life, and we can see about getting you some support. And I just want everybody to stay safe and come through on the other side of this.
Yes. So as well, to everyone watching, we want you to stay safe, to follow the safety measures that you have in place. Thank you again for watching another one of our COVID-19 check-ins, where we checked in on Detroit. Like, subscribe, follow, comment below in the video. On Twitter, we're at Building Desire. Facebook and Instagram, we're at The Counter Narrative. As always, be kind to yourself and be good to yourself as well, too.